Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Not a Scooby Podcast. Today we are joined by Ifro Thomas, a photographer and videographer based in Glasgow who is particularly talented at taking portraits. So in this episode we talk about the importance of authenticity within your content, how to make your clients feel comfortable, as well as the more technical specifications of Ifro's lens choice, outfits, timings, how she actually delivers the content to her clients for approval, payments, terms and conditions, all that lovely stuff. So if you're a portrait photographer or looking to develop your business as a portrait photographer, then this episode is for you. Without further ado, let's get straight into it, and I hope you enjoy. Hi Ifro, thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of the Not a Scooby podcast. First off, can you walk me through the process of a photo shoot?
So I'd say the planning and preparation for a photo shoot varies depending on what the project is and who the individual is that I'm shooting for. So for some shoots that are like portraits or birthday portraits, there isn't much planning that's done before. I'll probably say, okay, do you have any reference images? Can you let me know the color of your outfits just so I can like match with the color backdrop? And those are quite simple. But ones that are more like corporate shoots or corporate, video introductions, I always ask for a brief on like who they are, what they're aiming to achieve, who their audience is, and really the message that they want to get across. So I can kind of shoot around it because my idea of what they want versus their idea of what they actually want are always different. It varies from project to project, but things that I would say are fundamental is just having an understanding of who they are, what they're looking for, and then what they're trying to achieve from the shoot.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, what's the most common objective of these shoots? Is it someone looking to update their LinkedIn profile picture? Is it someone starting a small business, trying to build their personal brand? What's the typical answer to that question?
One I've been doing a lot of recently are like fitness shoots. So they are introductions for coaches who are trying to target an audience. And a lot of the time, the answer to that question is that they're looking to like market themselves in a way that isn't like selling something, if that makes sense. So they want to come across authentic. They want to be able to reach their clientele and they want to like inspire people when they're calling them to work with them. When they send their script, and then that's kind of the answer to the question, I'll say, okay, why don't we change this? And why don't we alter that? Because this sounds better on the receiving end. And this is more person to person rather than like business to person.
And you mentioned outfits. How many outfits would you suggest that a client brings with them per shoot?
Okay, so for photo shoots, before when I first started, I'd be like, this is the time we're shooting and bring as many outfits as you want. That never works. Now I'm like, we will do two outfits and then sometimes people will ask for a third. And the reason why I go for two outfits is because one, it gives people options for like a different look and they are able to use like photography and the photos from it more. And then also two is a good number because it allows us time to like, talk and warm up and go over poses rather than just like firing through so many different outfits.
So how do you warm up? Is there music? Are you doing stretches? Like, what is actually that process to get someone comfortable within the space around you before you start snapping away?
Okay, so definitely no stretches. But I do always make sure that there's music playing when a client comes in. I just think it sets the atmosphere and it lets them get a better feel for you as well, depending on the type of music that's on. And then it's also just general questions. How has your day been? Did you find here okay? Are you looking forward to the shoot today? Like, do you have any questions for me? And then it kind of just gets them talking more. And then when we're shooting, I just make sure that the conversation is flowing and that there's not big gaps of silence as well. And then even just like going through their poses with them as well is like a good way to warm a client up. So, okay, you want to achieve this, it's for this or it's for that. And then I'm like, okay, why don't we pose like this? This looks better. Why don't we pose like that? And then, you kind of like mirror each other. And it just, yeah, makes clients listen up a bit more because they feel like you know what you're doing.
Totally. Do you feel like some people, particularly when they're starting out, are quite guilty of initially, as the client arrives, everyone's chatting, it's fine. But once they actually start taking photos, they maybe get too locked in and tunnel vision on, I'm trying to take some good photos, and potentially neglect that client relationship and making sure that they feel comfortable and that the conversation continues to flow.
100%. That's actually some of the feedback that I always get is that thank you for making me feel so comfortable. Like I was nervous, but I really enjoyed that. It was a great experience. Um, and then I also get a lot of people saying that, oh, when I shot with my previous photographer, it wasn't like this. And my last photo shoot, I felt awkward. And I do think that this is something that is very common with male photographers when they're shooting females. Females do prefer like a lot of communication, also showing them like what you're trying to achieve, or like commenting and being like, well done, that was great. Okay, that looks perfect. Hold that. You do find that if that communication is lacking, it affects the experience as well. And even, for example, me, when I do shoots, even though I'm a photographer, I hate being on the other end of the camera. So if I'm standing and nobody's telling me how I'm doing or is showing me what to do, I'll feel like, God, do I look okay? Do I look an idiot? So it's just that reassurance as well that's really important.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like that's maybe one of your unique selling points or your strengths, is that comfortableness and confidence to be able to show someone through their poses? While I can understand, as you said, that maybe male photographers with a female aren't particularly confident in what angles look best and how to articulate that professionally. So do you feel like that's a strength that you feel very comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I do feel like it's not something that I've always had. When I first started photography, I think it depends how confident you are as a photographer as well. If you are shooting and you're unsure about what you're shooting or how you want it to look or the lighting, sometimes you find that you're very disconnected with the shoot and the subject. But I would say over time, especially because I shoot models and model portfolios a lot, because I'm very confident in what I'm doing, I can shoot and I can be like guiding you and showing you the poses as well. And then obviously I'm a woman too, so I know what looks good and how to kind of move my body and stuff as well. So yeah, I would say it's definitely something that I'm comfortable with and good at.
Great. How does your approach change depending on the level of experience that the client has? For example, if they're really experienced model, they're looking for portfolio updates, compared to when you've got a client who's never done a photo shoot like this before. They just realize the value of having a really professional appearance online, and this is their first step into doing that. How does your process change depending on who you're dealing with?
I would say for somebody that's not as advanced, the initial process before them shooting, it's important to understand where they're at. So I'll be like very detailed in the things that they need to bring and the type of outfits they need to bring. Especially with model portfolios, people have an idea of what they think a model portfolio should look. So they want to bring like their sexiest dresses, their most colorful outfits. And you're like, no, like for a model portfolio, you want to show that you look like a great blank canvas and you have a versatile look. So having things that are very bold and have a lot of character aren't always great for a portfolio. So with models that are starting out, we would have this kind of conversation and I'll go over in detail. Do you have this? Can you bring this? Do you need me to bring anything? And then during this shoot, they do need, again, a lot more reassurance. So demonstrating, okay, we're going to hold this, we're going to like this, and then also showing them what it looks like so they get used to what their poses and their facial expressions look like. So it's a very like back and forth process. Whereas if you're shooting a model that has a lot of experience, they normally tend to know what to do. So it'll be like a quicker, okay, have you got this? Can you bring this? Oh yeah, I brought everything. Okay, great. And then during the shoot as well, they naturally know how to pose more, and then you're just confirming that looks amazing, great, more of that, great. So it's like, yeah, 1 year you're a lot more part of the process from the beginning to the end. Whereas for someone more advanced, you're just kind of like letting them, okay, yeah, this is fantastic.
From the photographer standpoint, how can they be doing a better job of making sure that their client is looking their best? For example, lens choice. If you use a really wide angle lens, it maybe exaggerates features that can be good and bad. It might be not the best choice in lens for a portrait. Meanwhile, a tighter lens might be the best for a headshot, as it sort of compresses everything and always looks quite appealing. Are there any lenses in particular that you find yourself using time and time again?
Definitely. So like what you're saying about like the 14 like millimeter lens, if that is your style of photography and you wanted to go for this kind of like obscure fashion look, then you can shoot with that because you know it will like elongate the legs and elongate the hands and it has a very specific look. But generally, if you're shooting like model portfolios or portrait photography, if you're doing beauty shots or ones I would say from the chest above, an 85 millimeter lens for me is always crisp. It's just got such a flattering look on the face, and it's very closed in, and I feel like it really like shows off somebody's features more. If I was doing more full body shots, really, I normally use a 24 to 70 because it allows you to pull out and play with different angles a lot. So, one thing that I find that not a lot of photographers do is they don't move around a lot during shoots, especially if you're doing like portfolios. You want to have ones where they're on the floor or they're walking or you're shooting from below. And if you have too much of a fixed lens, it doesn't always work. Some shots don't always work. Their arms might look too big or their face might look too small. Whereas the 24 to 70 allows you to kind of be more versatile and pull out and pull in and shoot from different angles.
Nowadays that you have a studio, do you find that the majority of your shoots, your projects, are in that studio space now, or do you still find time to shoot on location when it best suits the subject matter?
So if I didn't live in Scotland, I would shoot outdoors all the time because natural light generally looks so natural. Like even with the way I shoot portraits and portfolios, I always try to mimic natural light because it just has this kind of like very soft, airy feel. And it feels like it's in a studio, but it doesn't at the same time. Have I found that I've had more studio shoots? I would say it's seasonal and it varies because I do like, videography as well. So there's a lot of shoots that I do on location that I don't really need the studio for. But I find that normally during the summer months with like birthdays and events and business events going on, people book into the studio more. I don't think having a studio necessarily means you'll attract more studio photo shoots. But I think what happens is like for myself, when you take on the responsibility of a studio and you're almost like a studio manager and you've got bills to pay, you tend to promote studio shoots more because that is now your base. So even when a client is like, "Oh, I want to shoot this," you'll most likely suggest, "Oh, we could shoot that in my studio," because you have a base that you shoot from.
I know you've had a mixed experience around renting a studio. I think everyone realizes the benefits of it, the professional outlook and presentation that it has. Oh, this person owns the studio, they must be professional. Can you talk about some of the downsides of renting the studio and how you've maybe found it difficult at times?
Having done it, so I've had studios twice now, and I feel like having a studio really depends on what you want for yourself and how you want to position yourself as a photographer or videographer. For me, I used to think, oh, having a studio like makes me more professional. It means I'll always have a place to shoot from. But the more that my portfolio started to expand, a studio now I realize isn't actually that necessary. In fact, I shoot more on location now than I do in the studio. Before, when I was just a photographer though, and was mainly doing studio shoots, it was good to have. But in terms of the downsides, depending on how much you're paying for a studio, you are responsible for everything that goes on there. So the cleaning, if you rent it out as well, you've got to manage a calendar, manage invoices, open up, lock up when you're on holiday. You've got to get somebody else to do that for you. And I feel like if you're trying to run a studio by yourself, it can be great if that's what you want for yourself, but it can also be a burden. And it can also make you not do the things or go as far as you want to because you feel like, no, my studio is my business. This is like my residing place, is where I always have to be. And I feel like for me, now that I've kind of transitioned out of my studio, I feel like a lot more free. But this is just like my personal preference. I've got a friend that's got a studio and he loves it, but he's got another team of creatives that are in there with him. So it's like shared responsibility.
Another thing we spoke about off camera was the business coach that you've been working with. How has working with them changed your perspective on how to run your business and to position yourself in a different way, having their outlook, their knowledge to guide you?
So, God, I would say it changed in so many ways, to be honest. I don't even know where to begin. So my coach is called RJL Filmhouse, but his name is Gus. He's originally from Scotland, but he lives in Dubai now. And some of the biggest changes that I've seen are really just in confidence. So believing in what I do, believing that there are things that I can go after, believing that I can achieve things, but also having the confidence to shop for myself in the way that I should. I feel like over the years, creatives are only now starting to get the respect that they deserve. I mean, we're still not there yet, but a lot of people view us as like hobbyists or like creative enthusiasts, and they can like haggle and negotiate with us or ask us to over deliver, or it's like, you work on my time. Whereas Gus was like, you need to set the standard for yourself and set the standard for them. And he's shown me that like as a business person, we hear this analogy all the time, right? But somebody doesn't go into a shoe store and start pricing, oh, that's 70 quid, can you get me for 35? That doesn't happen. But a lot of people have the mentality with creatives that I can come and tell you that my price is X amount and then you'll negotiate to cut it in half. And before I used to feel under pressure to agree. And I'm like, oh, do you know what? I'd rather take that amount than not make anything. Now I'm like, if that's going to cost me my pride and my business, I would rather not accept that and not make any money than to go against what I believe my worth is. So I feel like Gus has really shown me what it means to actually be a business person, even in terms of, for example, before you take on like a monthly phone contract with BT, there's like, the policies and what you can expect when it will come out of your account, all the kind of T's and C's. That showing up as a business person is also important to have that for any type of relationship when you're working with somebody. So what the T's and C's are, the return times, what it will cost, if you want extra raw footage, if it's something I do, something I not do, kind of like agreement so that there's a standard. And then the last thing I would say that's been really big is he's taught me that when you know how to shop for yourself better, it has a domino effect for the whole community as a whole. So, for example, if a client got a videographer to do a massive job for £100, if I then come on to do that job later, that person expects me to do it for the same price. And that's then had an effect on me. So even when I'm dealing with clients, he's like, make sure you do it in a way that means that the person coming after you, there's a good standard that's already been set. And that even when you're doing jobs in this community, it's important not to just think about yourself, but what you're doing for your fellow creative and how you're showing up for them.
Can we dive into that a little bit? How did you make the change and develop from a creative, a one-person band to a business that's operating in a more professional manner? What was the change there?
So to shop is more of a business than just like an individual. One thing that he's always, very strict with me about is structure. So if you're a business, you can't just post when you feel like you decide to post and go MIA. Like you have to be consistent and you have to show people that you're consistent and you offer a consistent product. Another thing he's very big on is knowing what your niche is and what the products are that you offer. Because when you know who you are, you know how you're going to shop on the marketplace. So with me at the beginning, I was like, oh, but I shoot this and I can do that and I can do this and I can do everything. And he's like, that's great. But what is the actual product that you offer? People don't want to go through this long list of everything that you do. They want to know, okay, I go to this person for X and this is what I, receive. So he's taught me how to do that more effectively. And the last way I would say that he showed me how to shop as a business more is just, again, being firm on what my services are and what I offer, what I am willing to do and what I'm not willing to do.
Previously, you've mentioned a specific software that you use that really streamlines the whole process from clients being able to review the photos and videos that you send them, contracts, invoices, etc. Can you tell me about that application?
Yeah, so I use a platform called Pixieset. Shout out Pixieset, if you see this, feel free to sponsor your girl. No, I'm joking. But, Pixieset is a really good platform because it allows me to send previews to clients. It also helps me do like my invoices, and it keeps a record of all my invoices. I can take deposits, I can do partial payments, full payments. And it also allows me to have like my packages as well on like a layout where if you're looking for this, you can click on that and it's got a drop down of everything to expect from a shoot and what the location is. Oh, it also has a place for your website too. You can send videos, long form, short form, send big albums as well, wedding albums, and it gives you kind of that room to like customize how you send it as well. So Pixieset's been a great platform. I literally do all my streamlining on that one platform.
Let's talk a little bit about the specific packages that you offer, how they differentiate from one another, but also how do you find that that helps with the client onboarding process? Do you find that sometimes people come to you knowing that they want video or they want photography content, but they don't know how much, they don't necessarily know how to use it? How long will this footage or photos last them in their social media strategy? How do you help them throughout that whole experience?
So my packages vary depending on whether it's like photography or videography. And with my packages, for my average portfolio session or studio session, they would receive about 10 to 12 images, and the shoot would be about 1.5 hours. If I was shooting a commercial client who wanted like, e-commerce or fitness clothing, then I have a package which includes, half day and then 30 images that are in that. With videography clients, I do promotional videos or I do micro content. So micro content is any business that pretty much needs short form content, whether that's talk to camera or a fashion reel of somebody, walking in clothes and like looking good. I structure my packages like that because it's more effective in terms of time for me and for them, and they know exactly how long that product will last them. So, for example, short form reels on average should last you a month. But if you wanted to go for 2 months, then we would like double up on the shoot. I just find that having those kind of structures allow the client to know what they can use it for, and then makes it easier for me to manage as well.
Let's move on to the editing of the photos. Are you using Lightroom, Photoshop? How do you actually edit the photos once you've captured them?
So I edit not in Lightroom. Capture One is where I make my adjustments before I then transport it over to Photoshop. Generally, I just prefer the layout of Capture One. I feel like it looks better. I have kind of more tools I can play around with.
And what is your approach, your mindset on retouching photos? Do you feel like it's sometimes necessary? Do you feel like people are often guilty of maybe overdoing it a little bit? Where's the line that you decide this is the amount of editing I'm willing to do and retouching to make you look your best, but not for it to go overboard and someone starts looking like an entirely different person?
So I feel like retouching again is very subjective to your style and what you want to achieve from a photo. For me, I always retouch photos because there's a specific way that I shoot in light, and retouching just gives me that extra room to play around with and achieve a certain style of look. Um, if a client doesn't want them retouched, it depends on what I'm shooting. If it's portraits and a client doesn't want them retouched, I would advise them that I can do minimal retouching, but like blemishes and maybe changing the lighting a little bit is like necessary, because that's like sending out raw photos. And to me, like if it's portrait photography or studio photography, then I don't send out raws. But I think, yeah, retouching just depends on what you want to achieve. Um, I do think with retouching, though, it's important not to go overboard, because especially when you're supposed to be a skilled photographer, you want your work to look lifelike and you want it to feel real. So over retouching almost takes it away from what you actually shot or who the subject is. And another thing that's really common with a lot of females is, can you make me slimmer and can you change this and can you give me a tiny waist and that big big bum? And I'm like, I mean, I can accentuate things a little bit, but I'm not going to completely change who you are, because that defeats the whole purpose of this shit. Like, so yeah, it depends.
Yeah, there's definitely a responsibility to not contribute to this sort of unrealistic body image, this Instagramification of every photo. Yes, maybe you feel better seeing this photo of you that's been highly manipulated because it's an image of you. But how does someone viewing that photo feel about themselves? Because maybe they can't tell how much it's been modified or manipulated. They think that's a realistic thing, and maybe, feel some type of way about, okay, well, I don't look like that. How can this person possibly look like that, when the reality is they don't? Yeah, there's definitely a responsibility there to find that balance and make sure you're not contributing to this unrealistic body image that a lot of people on social media struggle with, and often people maybe avoid social media in general to avoid this kind of content that makes them quite self-conscious about themselves.
Yeah, I feel like it does not just yourself, but also the client a disservice when it doesn't even look like the person anymore. It doesn't really serve your work in what you do, and then it also, like you said, it contributes to that kind of unrealistic standards. I mean, everybody has a different line, and each to their own. But personally, for me, yeah, I try to not go overboard.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important that we have pride in our work, that we feel like we're contributing to a greater good. With portrait photography, you're giving someone some confidence in themselves. So they look at these photos, wow, I've never looked like that. I feel really good about myself. I feel really confident. Meanwhile, there's certainly brands out there that I've drawn a line under and said, I don't want to work in these sort of industries because they don't align with my values, and I don't want to contribute to them in any way, shape or form, really. And I feel like we're very aligned on that.
Yeah, I've definitely had jobs before that I've been asked to do where I'm like, this isn't in line with who I want to be or what I believe, but also it's not the type of, like, I wouldn't want to give people the idea that that is the kind of work that I shoot and that I do. And for me, sometimes there are fine lines between, like, for example, one that's popular for that I do is like, there's a fine line between shooting something sexy and then it literally being like porn. And for me, when it crosses over to that line, because I've been asked to do stuff for, like, videography jobs, and I'd literally be shooting soft porn. And again, each to their own, but that's not something that I would post, or if my name was on it and people were to reach out for me to do it more, I'd necessarily feel comfortable with. So it's knowing what works for you and what doesn't.
AI, is it a part of your workflow? How do you feel about it in general?
AI is part of my workflow, but more for emails and quotes, and sometimes answering questions when I need to really break down things. I'll just put bullet points into AI, drop into paragraphs, and I'll fire it off. In terms of my actual editing workflow, I don't know if it's because I don't know how to use AI properly, but the amount of times I've gone and want to just fix a bit of hair and it would like completely change the whole face. Or I would try and clean the background and then it adds like a third hand and then the fingers are like, like that. And it looks like something from a horror movie. I'm just like, nah, AI has not worked for me. Maybe it will one day, I'd be open to it, but so far it's been not been much for me.
Goals for 2025. I'm not very big on New Year's resolutions, but is there anything that you want to achieve this year that you have in your sights as a goal that you can look back on in 2026 and say, yep, 2025 was a success because I achieved that?
2025, I want to do more e-commerce shoots, and I also am thinking about doing more weddings. Because weddings is something that I always have done sporadically in the background, but never really offered it as a service. So I'm potentially thinking this year it'd be good to start doing that.
And then finally, one piece of advice that you wish you knew sooner.
Get out of your own way. That would be my piece of advice. And getting out of your own way means that just to like stop overthinking things, to stop second guessing yourself, to stop trying to be a perfectionist, stop comparing yourself to others. It's like all the ways that you get in your own way, just get out of your own way. That would be the piece of advice that I wish I had used in it.
I think that's a fantastic way to end this week's episode of the Not a Scooby podcast. So, Ifro, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to the next time.
Well, thanks for having me. I had a great time.